Hello, I'm now going to talk about the text box on the second page of my notes about measuring a nation's income. Uh, in the box, I say, right about now, someone says, hey, what about, it could fill in the blank, use stuff or whatever. Um, so I made this little list that is generally a list of two lists of opposites, but not exactly, um, just to help pin down what's going on here. So GDP, this measure of economic well-being, warts and all, includes versus what it excludes. Um, it includes all new production. It excludes used goods. I kind of have a go-to example about this, why this would be important. I did a spring break in Turkey in the late 90s when I went to college in Germany. A group of 12 Americans were talked into going to Turkey for spring break by our Turkish friend. And when I got there, the first thing I wanted to do was walk around. We went to a town called Antalya. I wanted to walk around and just see what was around the hotel. So the girl I was seeing and I went for a walk, and just looking around, I had in my pocket I had about maybe $1 worth of German coins, and that's all the cash I had on me. We hadn't exchanged our cash into the Turkish lira yet. I mentioned something about going to the ATM and what that was like, but I didn't have any money on me, and we just wanted to go for a walk. The travel time was like 12 hours or something. We got going, and this kid came up on a horse-drawn carriage, which he was trying to sort of brand like the horse-drawn carriages you might see around Central Park or in downtown Annapolis or someplace. It's in Seinfeld. I can't quite think of the name of the carriage with the horse. It's a whole episode. Something that people do as a touristy thing. But the thing is, with this horse-drawn carriage, the carriage looked to me, and I'm pretty sure it really was, that it was a piece of equipment that was left in Turkey at the end of the First World War. I'm pretty sure it was that old. And the kid that was driving the thing was maybe 12. And the horse didn't actually look much younger. And so this kid he asked us if we wanted to ride. He spoke a little bit of English, and he asked us if we wanted to ride. We said no, thank you. We're just going for a walk. That's all we wanted to do, and we knew he would want to be paid, and we didn't have any means to pay him. She had no money on her, and so we didn't want to do this. The kid literally got off the carriage, grabbed my arm, and said, "Come with me. Come on. No, I won't. No, you don't have to pay. Come with me." Physically pulled us onto this carriage. And the horse stunk. It was gross. It was not what we wanted to do. We didn't have any way to pay him. But we felt pressured, so we got on this thing, and he drove us around. And then we saw something where we wanted to stop. There was a restaurant. We wanted to go check it out. And so we asked him to stop, which he did. And then he said, okay, that's $20. And I laughed at him, and I gave him all the change I had in my pocket, which was, like I said, maybe valued at $1, maybe. And he threw that on the ground and said something to me that I suppose wasn't very nice in Turkish. And I said, I told you I didn't have any money. I guess he didn't believe what I said. He should have. And then he quickly scrambled, grabbed the coins off the ground, and he said, next time you pay me $20. And he got back on this dilapidated horse and carriage thing and rode away, never to be seen again. Thank you. And so if in our measure of a country's economic well-being we include used goods, that would have meant for nearly 100 years, as that carriage traded hands we would be calling that somehow we would be calling that a contribution to Turkish GDP every time it traded hands since the First World War, because it was still in use for that long and not by this same, you know, um, business owner. That doesn't make any sense at all. So we have to exclude used goods, and we only include new production in GDP. GDP includes apartment rental. That's akin to a service. It includes the purchases, and it's the household. The one household investment is a new home, so it's included in the production of a new home, but not a used home, because then it's a used good. So when a house changes hands, that's not included in GDP, but an apartment rental is, which maybe is a little weird, but you could think of the apartment rental as being like a service. But that would also mean that a society who was decreasing home ownership but shifting into renting would have a higher GDP because of that transition. So our measure of economic well-being would be a little bit weird. But as I said, if that's happening and we're seeing that trend, that's just reported with the GDP data, and then the viewer of the data can interpret that however he or she wants to. Again, that's a little bit touching on stock and flow variables. These things might be mismeasured. We can disclose where they might be mismeasured and move on. It excludes illegal goods and services. And this is perhaps a little interesting. And by the way, I'm not saying that there's something legal or illegal about apartment rental. As I said, some of these things are opposites, some of them aren't. I'm just making two lists. There is also a state GDP measure that the Bureau of Economic Analysis does, and if time permits, I'm going to do a PowerPoint of video of me poking around the Bureau of Economic Analysis website, and I'll show you this. But states can be compared. There's a state GDP can be compared just like a national GDP. So I'll use that as an example. The state of Nevada allows prostitution. The state of Colorado has fully legalized marijuana. Maryland has not legalized either thing, fully legalized marijuana. So when those things became legal, marijuana more recently, Colorado's GDP presumably increased because we call them dispensaries here, but I don't know what you call them out there, pot dealerships, I don't know. Wherever they're getting this stuff in Colorado, now that it's legal, those businesses, at least should be, reporting their income to governments, which is making its way back to the Bureau of Economic Analysis. So did Colorado's output of goods and services actually rise when they legalized marijuana? Or put differently, with this change, comparing Maryland to Colorado, or go back to Nevada, Maryland to Nevada, where prostitution is legal, are those things not happening in Maryland? I think they are, pretty sure. So by excluding the illegal goods in our measure of standard of living, we might have something that's a little incomplete, and when we compare across time, using the legalization example in Colorado, you need to factor in, well, we're now measuring something we didn't used to measure when you legalize something, or if you were to ban it, perhaps. When you're measuring across space, comparing Maryland to, say, Nevada or Colorado, you need to say, well, as we're making this comparison across space, we have to say, we should realize it's being included, some things are being included in one state and not in another. This could be true with like Amsterdam compared to the United States as well, or maybe a better example would be Amsterdam compared to Germany, because they're both European, something like that. This is something to be aware of. That's what all this is. That's all I can say about that. Oh, this is a fun one. Maintenance service is included, but household production isn't. Maintenance service. That's maintenance service. This is household production. This is important because, and it might be something we can think of now as we're all sequestered in our homes with this coronavirus issue. A long time ago, my wife and I had a maintenance man come in and do some work in our garage here. There was a leak in the kitchen. The guy fixed the leak. And while he was working, my wife was here and talking to him, and she thought he was a pretty nice guy. He was a little older than we are. She has a sister who's a little older than we are, and she's singles, and you can see where this is going. So my wife actually set up a blind date between this maintenance guy and her sister. They went on a blind date. And so this maintenance guy, he is doing work for our family, and we're paying him, so it's being included in GDP. If they had hit it off and got married, I would probably expect that he would come around and help us fix things around our house and not charge us anymore. And that would mean the maintenance would still be getting done, but it would no longer be included in GDP. But it's supposed to be a measure of economic well-being. So sometimes it misses some things that are being produced just because of the way things are measured. You have to have some kind of tax returns or some kind of income statements in order to measure these things that are being produced. But it doesn't necessarily mean that they are or are not being produced just because of whether or not it's measured. A bigger one than my little maintenance example is childcare, right? Because if you have, and I cut back on my hours working when we had kids because we wanted to have one of us home with our kids, and my wife makes more money than I do, so it made more sense for me to be home than for my wife to be home. So that's what we did. And as a result of that, my income went down, so GDP went down. But I got to be home with my kids, and I think that's been a good thing overall for our household, and I think overall for households. If instead I'd stayed working, my income wouldn't have come down, GDP would have been higher. What's more is I would have had to put my kids in some kind of a daycare. Then GDP would be higher still because that would be measured. But the kids were getting taken care of when I was doing it. However, GDP was actually lower. So it's just something that, again, you just need to be aware of when you're thinking of something as an economic measure of economic well-being. There are little caveats and things depending on your discussion, that you might want to factor in. Another one. This is right from the definition. GDP includes foreigners' production here. Foreigners' production here, but it excludes. I'm focusing on U.S. GDP. Okay, it could be any country. Just substitute a different name in here. Americans' production there, as in it's measured within a country's borders. GDP is measured within a country's borders within a given time. So if foreigners are producing here, that's being measured. But American citizens who are living abroad, and I actually did work when I was in Germany, just on campus, a small part-time job, but my production was not being included in U.S. GDP. What was it being included in? I mentioned in the last video, it was included in U.S. GNP. So GNP includes all of GDP plus a country's citizens' production abroad. And finally, this is also in the definition, final goods are included, but intermediate goods are excluded, which I think I beat to death along the videos. And that's all I have to say about that text box.